Released on September 21st, 2004, X-Men Legends is an action RPG where players can choose one of the many X-Men and stop the Brotherhood from eradicating the human race from the face of the planet. X-Men Legends was praised when it first came out for its fun gameplay, cel-shaded comic-like graphics, and impactful soundtrack to make players feel like real superheroes. X-Men Legends has a bunch of content and excitement for players to experience, and without further stalling, let's analyze everything that makes this RPG so much fun. The overall gameplay of X-Men Legends is quite simple. Players choose 4 X-Men they want on their team, beat up the enemies that they come across, and complete the objectives in the mission. Each mission has its own variety and uniqueness. It's always more than just kicking ass and getting onto the end of the stage. Sometimes it's destroying certain objects, saving innocent people, stopping the Brotherhood from getting an advantage, or simple danger room simulations. But before we get into the combat system, the story should be discussed first to understand the motivation behind the X-Men and the Brotherhood. X-Men Legends follows the story of Allison Cressmere, a mutant that just recently found out about her powers and was kidnapped by the Brotherhood's goons, Mystique and the Blob. She's then rescued by Wolverine and Cyclops and accepted into the X-Mansion, where she tests out her powers and learns how to control them. While that happens, the X-Men go on other missions to protect others, such as where they go to the Heart Foundation, or save their buddy Gambit. After Gambit is rescued, the Brotherhood attacks the USS Arbiter, the ship where Magneto is imprisoned. The X-Men are unsuccessful in stopping their escape, and Magneto is back in the Brotherhood's hands. Afterwards, Allison's training is complete and takes on the name Magma, and ventures with the X-Men to go and help Colossus in preventing the Brotherhood in stealing dangerous plutonium. The X-Men fight off the Brotherhood and save Colossus. Now, the X-Men learn about new anti-mutant sentinels being built by General Kincaid to fight off the X-Men, while Magneto travels to Asteroid M to cover the Earth in darkness. While this is happening, Jean Grey, Professor X, and Emma Frost travel to the astral plane to save Colossus' sister, Ilana, who's being held captive by the Shadow King. They successfully save Ilana, but the Shadow King then captures Professor X. At an unopportune time, Magneto shows up to the X-Mansion to speak with Professor X, although he's gone in the astral plane, so a few X-Men go out there and talk to Magneto himself. They are then ambushed by Sentinels, and Magneto is captured. In the meantime, the X-Men go to an abandoned Project X building and find the place where they're building Sentinels. And then find out that General Kincaid is experimenting on mutants to create a new type of Sentinel. While they're there, they also find a way to go into the astral plane without being a telepath. Using this newfound knowledge, the X-Men go into the astral plane and save Professor X from the Shadow King. With Professor X saved, the X-Men travel to Asteroid M, where they defeat Magneto and search for the Graviton, which is controlling the asteroid. In their search, they find General Kincaid, who takes control of the most powerful Sentinel, Master Mold. The X-Men defeat Master Mold, find the Graviton, and Magma steers the asteroid back into space, and the X-Men go back to Earth. Magneto is still out there, but the day is saved, for now, until Apocalypse, who is watching the X-Men on Asteroid M, steps in, but that's not until the sequel. The story is rather simple and easy to follow, but it fits this game perfectly. The story feels exactly like a comic book story, where heroes fall but ultimately rise at the end of the day. The characters' dialogue is a bit shallow at times, but perfectly fits the characters, and players can definitely feel the connection between the X-Men and the Brotherhood. Okay, enough of the story. Now, let's move on to the combat system. The combat system in this game is near perfect. I love every aspect about it. Let's start with the basics. There are 3 types of characters: heavy hitters, energy users, and telepaths. Heavy hitters pack a huge amount of physical damage and will leave their enemies stunned and bruised. Energy users use their magic to fight, and magic comes in many different forms. No 2 magic users feel the same. Telepaths use their mind to defeat their enemies and completely mess with the minds of others. The great thing about each of these characters is they're fun to play with and are very unique in their own ways. This is mostly due to their unique abilities and special moves. All the characters have abilities that enhance their strength and defense, but the way it does it is very important. Heavy hitters get to massively improve their physical damage and defense, and magic users and psychics get to use their powers during normal attacks to enemies that are more prone to such attacks. Every character has their own special attacks that pertain to their powers. Wolverine uses his claws, Cyclops uses his visor, Storm uses her weather controlling powers, and so on and so on. Players don't have to be a master on Marvel lore to understand which powers each of the mutants use. These powers come at a cost though. The X-Men can only use their powers a few times before their energy bar falls and needs to recharge. Players should know when and which powers to use when fighting enemies. Players should also keep an eye on their health bars, as not all battles are easy to fight, and once a character dies, they can't be revived until the player reaches an extraction point and pays a small fee of the in-game currency. Once all the members fall, the player will have to load their latest save to continue the fight. Anyways, back to the abilities. X-Men Legends uses a level up system where players can upgrade their X-Men with each level they gain. Every level up grants a skill point towards the basics of each character and a skill point towards abilities and special attacks. Every 5th level grants 2 skill points along with a new special ability, like a new special attack, or being able to create a huge upgrade to one of the X-Men. Level 15 is the most important level, as players get the ability to use extreme powers and can further their special powers to the next level. Every level up is exciting, every upgrade and skill point counts, and it's so satisfying. There are 4 different special moves for each X-Men that follow a certain formula. The first special move acts mainly as the supreme superpower pertaining to the X-Men being used, and is a special attack. The second special move is most of the time an attack that does less damage but has more range and stun potential. The third move amps up the specifications of the character by increasing damage, health, or defense, or strengthening the X-Men's power. The fourth move is called an extreme power, an attack where the character uses their power to its fullest potential and destroys any enemy on screen. An extreme power doesn't use magic like the other special moves do, rather it uses small white pellets that once 4 are collected, form the X-Men logo, and can be used for one extreme move. Special moves 1, 2, and 3 have 3 different upgrade tiers, and each tier usually gives a new power to the special move. Players will have to decide which upgrade is worth it when their X-Men level up according to their playstyle. Players can change their team of X-Men when they find an extraction point. They can also save their game and visit Forge, who sells equipment, and the Healer, who sells health and energy packs, along with Danger Room disc. Okay, I think that's about it for the upgrade and special move systems. Let's move on to the other aspects of the combat. The X button punches, and the circle button kicks. Players can use both of these buttons to create combos to use against enemies. Square grabs and throws enemies, and triangle jumps. Throwing and grabbing enemies isn't that useful, but grabbing heavy objects and throwing them at enemies can prove to be beneficial. Speaking of enemies, there are many types of opponents the X-Men will pick a fight with across their journey. Sometimes it's the Orsa soldiers, their Brotherhood's goons, Murlocs, robots, Sentinels, or even Magneto himself. Anyways, the enemies in this game sometimes have a resistance to a certain type of attack. They'll take less damage from one of the 3 main fighter types. On the other hand, they'll take more damage from the other 2 fighting types. They appear more often as the player progresses through the game. It's a good idea because it forces players to use different types of X-Men and to ensure they're not just playing as one character. It also makes players think about their battle strategy, as most of the type resistant enemies are not alone, so they'll have to prioritize which characters to use to win the fight. Every so often, the player will run into an obstacle where they have to use a specific character in order to move on. This is a little annoying, but in most of these scenarios, an extraction site is near, so players can choose the required character, perform the task, and change back to the other character they were using. Speaking of characters, this game has a lot of replayability due to this team system. Due to each character being so unique, if the player decides to keep changing up their team for each playthrough, or each mission, they'll have a different experience each time they do so. That's enough of the story mode, let's move on to the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a simulation used by the X-Men to test a new mutant's powers. In this game, players pick up Danger Room discs throughout their journey, and they can use them in the sub-basement. The Danger Room missions are like an extension to the tutorial, showing players how to execute certain combos, learning about each of the special moves, taking out certain enemies, and so on and so on. The beginning challenges are boring, but the harder challenges prove to be difficult, but fair. Speaking of the difficulty, the game sorts the level of difficulty with 6 different categories: Freshman, Sophomore, Junior, Senior, X-Men, and then the last category, Legend. Hey, this is a school after all. It's pretty self-explanatory why Legend is the hardest and Freshman is the easiest. Other than the Danger Room missions, players can utilize the skirmish and objective modes. In objective mode, players can choose their team and choose their enemies. The objective is to beat the same enemies 5 times in a row. In skirmish mode, multiple players fight each other with the character they choose to fight as. In both modes, players choose which area they want to fight in, and choose which characters they want to play as, and they can choose more than just the X-Men. They can play as people from the Brotherhood of Mutants, and as the smaller enemies they ran into throughout the game. With a game like X-Men, it was all expected that the graphics would reflect the look of a comic book. X-Men Legends uses cel-shaded graphics to give off this comic book aesthetic. It's pretty solid, nothing looks out of place, and it definitely fits the feel of the game. Anyways, X-Men Legends was made in 2004 for the 6th generation of gaming, so not every texture is fully detailed, and the game can only run at 480i or 480p depending on the console used. The graphics are a bit dated, the in-game cutscenes feel awkward due to the lifeless animations, and players can see pixels during the pre-ordered cutscenes if they're playing on an HD TV. With that being said, there's still lots of detail in every level, and doesn't kill the immersion of the game. Every character pops out, has their own stance, and contrast as to not blend in with the background or other characters. One of this game's strong points is its variety. Of course, some asset pieces are reused, and sometimes players go back to locations they already been to, but the arrangement of the stage and assigned mission are different. Loading screens are accompanied by artwork of the characters, and often show what villain the X-Men will have to fight next, or which location they're heading to. They were compressed to fit on a DVD, but they still look good regardless, and they look even better uncompressed. Now, let's move on to the characters. Each character has their own set of animations, and their own 3D head model, which appears in the bottom left of the screen on the X-Men logo. There's very few animations the characters share with each other, and because of that, each X-Men is allowed to express their own fighting style due to their completely unique animations. Speaking of characters, each X-Men, with the exception of Professor X, has at least one alternative costume they can use during combat. It doesn't provide any additional powers or bonuses, but it's a nice feature to have, mostly because I'm very fond of Wolverine's classic outfit. Moving on, let's talk about the details of the special attacks. Each special attack has an icon in the top left when the player holds down R2. It's pretty clear what each special move does based on the icon alone. They're simple, but effective. The animation for the special moves themselves are pretty cool, they're impactful, and the damage from the move definitely shows on the enemies. Players will most likely find themselves using the small map they can pull up by pressing R3. The map's pathways start to reveal themselves as the player gets closer to them, and there's small icons that indicate different things. The orange X's are interactable objects which usually are activated or destroyed in order to complete an objective. There's the blue X-Men logo for the extraction points, and there's these red arrows that act as the button where players go from one area to another. Small details also go beyond the map, such as whenever the player gets separated from the rest of their party, the round vital signal at the bottom of the X-Men's model will add a white line to indicate the player is still away from the other X-Men. Another small detail is, whenever one of the X-Men does bleed damage to their enemies, they will blink, and small red pellets will spew out of their body. There's also Easter eggs here and there, like this young boy that appears during the Protect New York Against Sentinels mission, who turns out to be Bishop, who would later become an X-Man, and was included in the sequel. The sound design of X-Men Legends is amazing, the soundtrack's killer, and the voice acting's pretty good. And that's probably attributed to the fact that many talented and recognizable voice actors were chosen for this game. Patrick Stewart himself reprises his role as Professor X in this game, and Wolverine is voiced by Steve Blum, who also voiced Tank Dempsey for the Call of Duty Treyarch Zombies line. The dialogue between characters is very convincing and well written, probably because previous X-Men story writers wrote the story, and the whole thing was being supervised by the man himself, Stan Lee. The dialogue is very important in this game. Not only does it provide main points in telling the story, but also shows the genuine interactions amongst the X-Men and conversations with the X-Men and their enemies. It never feels generic or bland, just about every line is exciting. A good example would be the conversations between Beast and Magma. Beast is very insightful with the way he talks about the X-Men, their enemies, and the world around them. He provides a lot of deep and insightful dialogue. And, of course, since this is a Marvel production, there are moments of comic relief, so not everything is so tense, and players can get a much-needed laugh.
Looks like a bull elephant tore through this place. What happened here?
Me.
The X-Men will also give small quips whenever they defeat enemies or level up. Not much to say about it, other than it built onto their personality. The enemies will also do this sometimes whenever they're defeated. Anyways, onto the soundtrack. The X-Men Legends soundtrack works in two parts, tension and no tension. Whenever action isn't happening on screen, players will hear the ambience pertaining to the environment they're in. Whenever there's action on screen, the real music fades in, and the players can get pumped about ripping up some bad guys. The action music is a joy to listen to. The adrenaline it gives certainly amps up the fighting. The action music has a certain structure to it, but it's often executed in different ways to ensure no two tracks sound too similar to each other. And, let's not forget the sound effects. The sound effects in this game are also pretty good. Punching and kicking enemies feels very impactful, and the sound effects for the special moves also feel very appropriate and in line with the power being used. X-Men Legends is full of content with a bunch of extra stuff. As mentioned before, players can collect comics, concept art, and Danger Room discs throughout the game. Players can view the comics and concept art in the X-Mansion, and the comic books also give a boost to certain X-Men once they're collected. Another thing players can do in the X-Mansion is talk with other X-Men and learn a little bit about themselves and their relationship with others. There's also biographies of each of the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants players can read. There are short descriptions of the characters, but they are very insightful, and I would recommend giving them a read if you decide to play this game and aren't all that familiar with the X-Men lore. Going back to the X-Mansion, players can also trigger flashback missions whenever they talk to certain X-Men. These aren't mandatory in beating the game, but add a bit more content to the game and gives additional XP to the characters which they can use on main missions. Players can also rewatch all the movies in this game in the X-Mansion, even before they beat the game and watch all the cutscenes. Apparently, Angel was supposed to be playable in this game, but was taken out late into development without a clear reason. Now, onto the issues of this game. Honestly, I don't really have any grievances with this game, just small issues. Sometimes, enemies are on a slightly higher or lower elevation, and it becomes really hard to hit them despite the fact the enemy is right in front of the X-Men being used. The extreme moves don't feel that good when the player can first use them. They become more useful in the final missions, but once the player first reaches level 15, extreme moves aren't that great. Wolverine is overpowered in this game. He has great attack and defense, a healing factor, bleed damage, which is when enemies slowly lose health after they've been hit, and a special move that does a ridiculous amount of damage. The player should definitely use him if they want to win. Also, sometimes the dialogue between characters is muffled and compressed poorly.
Where's Blob taking the kid?
She's ours now, Wolverine. You'll never see her again.
We'll get her back, Mistake. Even if we have to cut down each and every one of you Brotherhood psychos.
Other than that, there's nothing major holding this game down from being fun and fair. X-Men Legends is a really fun game with tons of content for players to explore and enjoy themselves with. The combat system is amazing, the visuals are very unique and look like a comic book, the soundtrack is beautifully crafted, and there's a bunch of bonuses to make this game worthwhile. Let's count everything up. 15 playable X-Men along with the Brotherhood mutants and enemies the player can use in the Danger Room. An amazing combat system with plenty of fun upgrades and special moves, a variety of locations and enemies to fight, an amazing soundtrack that switches between ambience and action music, a very unique art style that fits well with the X-Men, multiple costumes for each of the X-Men, small but fun Danger Room missions along with the other 2 Danger Room modes, amazing voice acting and some well-written dialogue, and tons of Easter eggs and small extras for the player to find and collect. X-Men Legends has small issues that definitely don't get in the way of the player's fun. Everything about this game is enjoyable. The game really entices and immerses the player with its comic-like graphics, fun gameplay, and amazing soundtrack. And until the next attack by a huge supervillain, the X-Men will stay strong.
I'm Deborah Owens for RVN World News. Have a pleasant evening.